Hi, morning. With the rise of the trend of violence against women during COVID-19, active bystanders are needed more than ever. If you don't know what an active bystander is, stick around as we will be discussing how you can take a stand against gender based violence in Trinidad and Tobago with Dr. Ann Barratt. We'll be right back.
Your strategy has to involve your mindset, and your strategy then involves the actions that you take to move you from where you are to where you want to be.
I'll start with what Visa isn't, right? Visa doesn't issue credit card. We don't issue credit. So Visa doesn't do that, which surprises a lot of people.
We'll use a phrase like, things changed, but things don't change. People change things. All the legislation that has been passed, somebody advocated for that. And so International Women's Day is to commemorate that history of women making change.
Several of the banks have started to migrate their existing debit card portfolio to chip and pin EMV technology. So the SMEs are going to benefit from a wide range of customers who previously did not have a credit card, but only had a debit card.
Good morning and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers the need to revive and survive and adapt to the new normal of COVID-19. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing how you can take a stand against gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago with Dr. Ann Barratt. Dr. Ann Barratt is a lecturer and head at the Institute of Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies campus in St. Augustine. She's a graduate of the University of the West Indies, holding a BA in Media and Communications Studies with Political Science. We had a little conversation earlier about Tobago. We're not going to cover that today, but we are aware of what's happening. We've had guests in the past where we've identified there are a lot of folks who are losing their jobs or have lost their jobs, and there's this sort of the walls are closing in on you feeling, and then with that there's an increase of violence. So for those who don't know, with the term, what does it mean when you say gender-based violence?
Okay, gender-based violence is very literal. It means that violence is perpetrated, directed, expressed, sanctioned, supported in ways, diminished, etc., against a person or group of persons based on their gender or based on their status or role they occupy or identity positioning that they occupy in a hierarchy, i.e. an arrangement or a system that says this is how you will exercise your reproductive labor or your productive labor. In other words, let me translate that. When we think of gender-based violence, we think about all of those meanings, those roles, those identities that we say people should have because of this social construct as it connects to the biological. All of those things become a site of violence, either considered disciplinary, reinforcing, containing, diminishing, or judgments. So gender-based violence is not just human conflict. It says talk about human conflict is to suggest that there's this kind of neutral dysfunctionality. No, it is triggered and fed and reinforced by particular views about femininities and masculinities, and the women, men, non-conforming, whether in terms of woman, man, or masculinity and femininity, these perceptions about who you are and who you can be in terms of this gender, and how you are then disciplined, controlled, etc., as I've said before. So really and truly, gender-based violence is targeted violence. Just like when we talk about racism, is targeted violence, or classism is targeted violence rooted in class or race or ethnicity or religion. Similarly for gender, it's not just people being frustrated and having dysfunctional conflict. It's that you express some form of violence to some degree because of how you perceive masculine and feminine identities and roles.
This is an interesting conversation because I've had in my circle, in my group, anytime some assignment to a role of a gender comes up, everybody kind of stares at me. I'm like, oh boy, what's Pauline gonna say? This idea of a woman supposed to be in the kitchen and cooking and so forth. And then there are also folks who express this sort of, well, you know what? Men have it hard too. So there's this either or. And when it comes to this gender-based violence conversation, why is it important to separate that conversation?
Two things I would say, just to reinforce at the beginning. You can't compare victimhood, and we must not do it. One. So when people say, oh, well, gender-based violence, statistically, we see across the globe, affects women and girls more so than men and boys. But, what about the men, and men have it hard? That's a problem. That's a problem because of one, you're trying to compare victimhoods when circumstances and status and privilege and subordination is very different, and it's inequitable and unequal. Two, it's also sort of a backlash. Okay, we want to focus on those who have long been subordinated and diminished, and it makes you uncomfortable, and therefore you try to undermine the conversation and the focus of that conversation because there's an underlying presumption, whether the person is aware of overtly or not, that this group does not deserve this sort of attention. So one has to confront the implicit biases around saying, well, men have it hard too. Of course, everyone has it hard in some way, but the experience that those groups that are constantly vulnerable based on the way we have structured our society, the experience of those people are in no way to be diminished because there are instances of the alternatives, right? And the need to distinguish is in order to pay attention to those points where the source of our problems, the source of our concern, the source of our moral panic keeps reproducing itself. So for example, we may all feel appalled if we see a woman is killed, yet another one today. Or we may all feel appalled if there is a public, sexual violence or murder or something like that against a woman or a girl. We may even feel appalled if we see a man is killed in the context of, let's say, a domestic violence situation, which is very, very rare, incidentally. But we are not willing to confront the fact that, going back to what I just said about the rarity of men being killed in this domestic violence context, we are not willing to confront the fact that we are all complicit as bystanders in reproducing the violence that women and girls experience, be it sexual or physical or financial or whatever. And we're not willing to confront the fact that we have to disrupt what we take for granted as moral, as right, as normative. So it is important that when we think about it, we distinguish between people generally experience varying degrees of violence or subordination, depending on where they sit on society, and systematic structural arrangements that subject groups, particularly women and girls, members of the LGBTQI community, the disabled, the elderly, systematically reinforce and reproduce your vulnerability to violence.
Mental health in general has become a trending word. It's just like, I'm going to have a mental health day. I still think there's a divide between the age groups, But when it comes to gender-based violence, what are the effects, or what is the number one thing that we should be aware of when it comes to women and mental health?
Oh my God, this is a complex and pressing issue, I would suggest. Now, gender-based violence I think that there is a ripple-on effect. When one finds oneself subject to, as I said, targeted violence, based on who you are supposed to be, the roles you perform, the identities you are expected to express, whether it's in the home or the workplace or in public, this then becomes this targeted violence, be it physical, emotional, psychological, whatever, can then influence how you see yourself, how you see yourself in relation to others, how you see your value, how you understand reality, how you see the capacity for doing and being, how you see your capacity or your right to refusal, how you see the potential to live a livable life, how you see the functionality of your lives and the worth of being. And in all of those influencing places, all those areas of influence, it can then have an effect on the stability of your emotional response, your psychological response, your relational understanding of yourself. All of these things come together and can lead to a number of varying mental health conditions or disorders. They can also be triggering for pre-existing mental health conditions and disorders that you may have had, but there was not that catalyst moment, be it experiential or even biological, that would have triggered it. And so when we think about violence, from the physical to the social, to the psychological, to other all forms I'm talking about, I'm speaking in very general terms, so we see the connection. We need to think about the ripple-on effect. So let me give an example. You may have a woman who's working. She has a family, and she's productive, and she's doing what she has to do. Let's say she experiences gaslighting on a daily basis or on a frequent basis, maybe once a week, whatever. And I'm not even putting in physical. She experiences gaslighting in her household from her partner. And she manages this all the time. And it creates gaslighting has a tendency to create a lot of doubt, a lot of questioning of reality. She manages this, and she deals with what she has to deal with. Then she moves, and she has to engage with her peers, her children, her co-workers, her other family members, the public, wherever. If you are in a position, a state of mind where you are you find yourself in a persistent state of doubt, or your self-esteem is drawn into question, undermined, or you are unclear of your functionality, how then do you think that person translates themselves across these other contexts, in the workplace, in the public place, with their friends and family and their kids and so forth? So their roles that they perform are implicated, mediated by this moment of gaslighting, just by way of an example, of course. So women who experience, and as we know, women in the majority experience gender-based violence in the private, and in terms of particularly sexual violence and sexism and sexual harassment in the public. And I speak not to the exclusion of anybody else, but I'm speaking in terms of the majority. You then find yourself subject to these moments of uncertainty, moments of threat. There is an author whose name is escaping me right now, who says one of the greatest forms of violence that women live with on a daily basis and learn to live with and come habituated to is a persistent sense of being under threat. I have to go think about it this way, and the discourse of personal responsibility. Park your car in the right place. Walk and look about. Check the taxi driver before you take. Look behind you. Don't take the wrong drink. Don't smile too much. Don't be on your phone. Be alert. Do all of these things, which women are constantly encouraged to do to protect themselves, which suggests that you are living in a world out in both private and public space that by default is violent against you. Contemplating that reality and adding incidents of real violence against the person some more than others. You can see how depression might set in. You could see how other forms of mental health disorders or mental health conditions come to the fore. But there's another.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
So when it comes to being a bystander, you know, what is your role to reduce the gender-based violence?
Okay. Now, first of all, I want to pick up on the word empathy. Before the break, you were saying, you know, it seems as if empathy has disappeared or doesn't seem to exist in the hearts and minds of a lot of people. If we look at social media, and we're thinking both in terms of gender-based violence, we're thinking in terms of the current insecurity around COVID-19 and those who are affected, around climate change, around food insecurity, around so many other things, employment, job insecurity, everything that we're living in the most profound ways. And I think that before I even say what you can do, I would say that we live in this kind of strange circumstance where the bystander effect presumes that somebody else will do it through what is defined as diffusion of responsibility. We say, okay, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to intervene. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to act. I don't have to do nothing because there are others who can take responsibility for this effect. So you see an incident, I'm not going to intervene, let somebody else do it. Or if there's a group, or you see someone saying, you know, wear your mask and protect the other person. I don't have to do that. I have choice over myself. Somebody else will take responsibility. Or you have never lived gender-based violence in your house, let's say domestic violence or intimate partner violence. Oh, I don't know anything about that. That's not part of my reality. Somebody else will deal with it. So there is this diffusion of responsibility that disrupts the ideal of empathy. Empathy being something that we are taught to be part of our humanity. We do unto others as we'd have them do unto you. So we, as a principle, and so we understand somebody else's experiences and reality and respond to it in an empathetic way, a way of recognizing and a way of sharing meaning and understanding. When it comes to gender-based violence, a lot of times the bystander diffuses responsibility, responds to groupthink, looking to the rest of the group to see what is going on before they act based on what their threshold is, what their instinct is, or they decide that they don't want to put themselves out there. And there are legitimate reasons for this. It could be fear. It could be that they have experienced some degree of trauma, and so they might expect an outcome based on their experience that prompts them not to act because they think that the outcome that they had, which may have been dysfunctional, will occur. Or a person may not know what to do or how to take it further. They feel impotent because they don't know what to do with the situation. Another reason may be they have tried to intervene in the past and they didn't get the desired outcome. So they are impatient or they have resigned themselves to circumstances. For example, your neighbor might have been experiencing domestic violence. You called the police once, the police came and the person said, no, it's okay. I don't want to call. It's all right. And you say, but look how I tried to help. Whatever those circumstances come into play, the bystander has to then go against that instinct to diffuse responsibility, to distance oneself, saying that the group, some person in the group will take responsibility, and understand your power to initiate change from below, as in from the community level.
Sign up to be notified for our next live show in the links. Check in the links in the comments. If you're watching us on the replay, same thing. Don't worry, you'll get it straight directly to your email. As always, be sure to like us as well on YouTube and LinkedIn. And thank you so much for joining us for this show as well as the shows previously in 2021. Make sure to